So the whispers floating around the boxing world right now are getting way too loud to ignore, because sources are alleging that Claressa Shields is sitting in the middle of what might be the single most humiliating week of her entire professional career. And honey, the receipts are not just bad, they are devastating. We are talking 5 days. 5 little days before what was packaged and sold to us as a historic, legacy-cementing, career-defining fight night. And according to the seeding charts circulating all over the internet, enormous chunks of that arena are still glowing bright blue. And for anybody who does not speak fluent Ticketmaster, blue means available. Blue means unsold. Blue means nobody came. Entire rows. Entire sections. Just sitting there, wide open, while the clock bleeds out toward fight night, and the blogs are screenshotting every single pixel of it. And listen, before we even unroll these receipts, I need everybody to understand what this story is actually about, because this is bigger than tickets. This is about a woman who has spent years telling every microphone in America that she belongs in the same breath as Muhammad Ali, the same breath as Mike Tyson, the same breath as Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Claressa Shields did not quietly call herself great and move on. Claressa Shields climbed onto the roof of the entire sports pantheon, planted her flag in the shingles, and dared the whole world to tell her she did not belong up there. Well, allegedly, the world is answering her right now, not with words, but with wallets. Closed ones. Because if the numbers making the rounds this week are even halfway accurate, the self-anointed GWOAT cannot convince the general public to spend date night money on the biggest fight of her life, and the silence at that box office is screaming louder than any interview she has ever given. Now here is where this gets genuinely messy, because the timing of all this could not be worse for her camp. Over the past few weeks, Claressa Shields has been everywhere. And I do not mean everywhere in the gym. I mean everywhere on your feet. Interview after interview after interview, sitting on couches, perched in podcast chairs, smiling into ring lights, and every single one of those appearances was supposed to function like a commercial for this fight. That is the whole point of a press run. You talk, the clips travel, the people get invested, and the tickets move. That is the formula. That is how it has worked for every major fighter of the modern era. But sources close to the situation are saying the exact opposite has happened here, that every interview Claressa Shields sat for actually pushed casual buyers further away, because the moments that went viral had absolutely nothing to do with boxing. Not her jab, not her footwork, not her opponent, not the stakes. The clips that traveled were the personal ones, the messy ones, the ones that made people tilt their heads and ask what any of this has to do with a championship fight. And we are going to walk through all of it today. The ticket map, row by row. The interviews, clip by clip. The viral moments that her team probably wishes they could scrub off the internet. The comparisons to the real needle movers of boxing, the Mayweathers, the Canelos, the Tanks, the Crawfords, and what their buildings look like 5 days out versus what hers looks like right now. We are going to talk about the pattern from her last fight that a lot of people quietly noticed and nobody in her circle wants to address. We are going to talk about who else is on this card, because baby, that matters more than you think. And by the end of this, you are going to understand why so many people in the boxing community are saying out loud what Claressa Shields refuses to hear. The drama is not overshadowing her boxing career by accident. The drama is the career. And allegedly, deep down, she already knows it. But first, let us go to the scene of the crime, because that is honestly what this seeding chart is starting to feel like. So the screenshots started circulating earlier this week. Fans, critics, and a couple of very entertained bloggers pulling up the official ticket map for the Claressa Shields fight and posting it with the kind of captions you do not come back from. And y'all, when you look at this map with your own 2 eyes, the story tells itself before anybody says a word. The gray sections, those are the nosebleeds, the cheap seats, the get-in-the-door tickets. A decent chunk of those are gone. Sold. Fine. That tracks, because the cheapest inventory always moves first in any arena on earth. But then your eyes drift down to the lower bowl. The real seats. The seats that cost real money. The seats that tell you whether a fighter is actually a draw or just a headline. And that is where the whole narrative collapses, because section after section after section is sitting there in dark blue. And again, in Ticketmaster language, dark blue means heavy availability. Not a sprinkle of singles here and there. Blocks. Clusters. Whole neighborhoods of unsold inventory in the parts of the building where the promotion makes its actual profit. And it gets worse when you zoom in, which is exactly what the internet did. People started clicking into individual sections, pulling up row views, seat by seat, and posting what they found. Rows where maybe 4 seats out of 20 are taken. Rows where the only sold seats are scattered singles, which tells you these are bargain hunters and comp ticket recipients, not a fan base storming the gates. One screenshot making the rounds shows a lower bowl row with a stretch of blue so long you could park a limousine in it. Another shows an entire side of a section with barely a gray dot in sight. 5 days out. Not 5 weeks. Not 5 months. 5 days. And to put that in proper perspective, we have to talk about what 5 days out looks like for the fighters Claressa Shields keeps name-dropping herself next to, because the gap is not a gap. It is a canyon. It is the Grand Canyon with a boxing ring at the bottom of it. See, when Floyd Mayweather was in his prime, 5 days before a Floyd fight, the building was gone. Sold out. Sealed. The secondary market was the only conversation, and the prices up there were criminal. 5 days before a Canelo Alvarez fight, you are not finding a lower bowl block of blue. You are finding grown men refreshing resale pages, praying somebody's card got declined. 5 days before a Gervonta Davis fight, the arena is a lockbox. 5 days before a Terrence Crawford fight, and this one matters, and we will come back to exactly why it matters in a few minutes. The seats are spoken for. Even Jake Paul, and I need y'all to sit with this one, even Jake Paul moves buildings 5 days out. The Jake Paul and Mike Tyson event had the entire sports world in a chokehold months before the first bell. Months. And here is the self-declared greatest woman to ever do it. The woman who says her name rings bells with Ollie and Tyson and Jordan, staring down a map full of blue with less than a week to go. Allegedly, there are already conversations happening behind the scenes about how to paper this building. And if you do not know that term, papering means giving tickets away, flooding the seats with freebies, comps, community giveaways, radio station bundles, anything to make sure the cameras do not catch empty chairs on fight night. And listen, if that happens, we will all see it. Because the giveaway economy leaves footprints. Radio hosts suddenly holding 20 tickets. Local businesses posting ticket drops. Buy one, get one energy. Some people are already joking that this is about to turn into the Oprah car giveaway of boxing. You get a ticket, everybody gets a ticket. And honestly, the way this map looks, that joke is aging into a prophecy. Now, because her supporters are definitely already typing, let me be fair for one paragraph and one paragraph only. Could the sales surge in the final days? Sure. Boxing is a walk-up sport in certain markets, and late surges happen. Nobody is saying the arena will be empty on fight night. What people are saying, and what the screenshots document, is that 5 days out, the organic demand for this fight is nowhere near the level of the rhetoric surrounding it. And that distinction matters, because Claressa Shields did not build her brand on being a solid regional attraction. Claressa Shields built her brand on being the standard, the measuring stick, the name that supposedly sits above every other name in the sport. And you cannot spend years shouting that you are upstairs with the ghosts of the greats, and then go quiet when somebody pulls up the seating chart and asks why the upstairs is the only part of the building that's sold. But okay, let us get into the part of this story that is genuinely fascinating, because the ticket map is only the symptom. The disease, and I am using that word deliberately, is the press run itself. Over the last several weeks, Claressa Shields has been on what can only be described as an interview marathon. Big platforms, big hosts, big reach. And on paper, this was the smart play. The fight needed heat, and heat comes from visibility. But then the clips started hitting the timeline, and a pattern emerged that her team had to have noticed, because everybody else sure did. The Claressa Shields moments that traveled, the ones that got clipped, reposted, quoted, stitched, and laughed over, had nothing to do with the fight, nothing to do with her opponent, nothing to do with legacy, belts, or boxing at all. The viral clips were the personal revelations, the relationship talk, the drama responses, the little unguarded moments where the conversation slid into territory that had the comments section howling for all the wrong reasons. Take the appearance that set the internet completely on fire, the sit-down where the conversation drifted into her relationship with Papoose, and Claressa Shields delivered the line that has now been clipped into oblivion. When the subject of Papoose and his history came up, the energy in the room shifted, and instead of steering the moment back toward the fight, she is supposedly 5 days away from headlining. She leaned all the way in. The quote that escaped that interview, the one about him not being anybody's husband but being her hubby, was clipped, captioned, and detonated across every platform within hours. That was the moment the internet took from a fight week press run. Not a prediction, not a promise to dominate, not a single second of talk about the woman standing across the ring from her. The takeaway was a relationship soundbite that made the blogs lose their collective minds and made the boxing purists put their faces in their hands. And then, because apparently one viral relationship moment was not enough, the same press run produced a second wave of clips that were somehow even further from boxing. There was the segment where the conversation got so personal, so graphic in its implications about her private life with Papoose, that half the blogs covering it had to censor their own headlines. People were not sharing those clips because they were excited to buy a ticket. They were sharing those clips the way you share a car accident on the highway. Slow down, stare, gasp, drive away. And here is the thing that should genuinely concern her camp. Attention and conversion are not the same animal. A clip can do 5 million views and sell 0 tickets. And sources are alleging that is precisely the equation playing out right now. The views are enormous. The map is blue. Both things are true at the same time. And that is the entire story of Claressa Shields in 2026 compressed into one sentence. Now compare that pattern to the interview before it and the interview before that, because this is not a one-time slip. Watch the tape across the whole run. There was the sit-down where the most replayed segment was her addressing the women she has been feuding with, and the internet clocked something in her tone that it has not stopped talking about since. While discussing the other women in and around her orbit, the conversation turned to looks, of all things, and she came within half a syllable of declaring herself prettier than women who have never once made their appearance their argument. She caught herself mid-sentence, and you can see the exact frame where she catches herself, but the clip was already immortal. And the internet, being the internet, immediately pulled the receipts on her energy in that moment, because there is a specific flavor of irony in lecturing other women about thinking they are all that while sitting in a chair that you are occupying, allegedly, because of the drama attached to your name rather than the sport attached to your resume. And that right there is the pivot point of this entire discussion, so I need y'all to lock in. When people think of Serena Williams, the first image is a tennis racket and 23 Grand Slams. When people think of Simone Biles, the first image is a woman defying gravity in ways physics had to rewrite its own rules to explain. When people think of Sha'Carri Richardson, the first image is fire on a track, nails, speed, a photo finish. The athlete comes first. The brand is built on the craft. But when people think of Claressa Shields right now, and I need her day one supporters to be honest in the comments about this, the first image is not a left hook. It is not Olympic gold. It is a podcast chair. It is a feud. It is a quote about somebody's husband. It is a wig joke from the blogs. It is Papoose. And that is not a perception problem the public created. That is a perception problem the press run manufactured, packaged, and shipped, one viral non-boxing clip at a time. The interviews were supposed to sell the fight. Instead, they sold the circus. And now the circus has a seating chart, 5 days out, glowing blue like a midnight swimming pool. And since we are talking about perception, we have to talk about the claim that started this whole bonfire, because it did not actually come from a hater. It came from inside her own house. Not long ago, Papoose sat down for an interview of his own. And look, say what you want about the man, but he looked that interviewer dead in the camera lens and declared, with his whole chest, that Claressa Shields is the #1 draw in boxing. Not women's boxing. Boxing. Men or women. #1, and if not #1, then top 3. And the internet replayed that clip next to this week's seating chart like a prosecutor playing a tape for the jury. Because if Claressa Shields is genuinely a bigger draw than Terrence Crawford, a bigger draw than Canelo Alvarez, a bigger draw than Gervonta Davis, a bigger draw than Ryan Garcia, a bigger draw than Tyson Fury, a bigger draw than Shakur Stevenson, then explain the blue. Explain the blocks of unsold lower bowl seats 5 days before the bell. Crawford does not have blue. Canelo has never met blue. Tank sells his building before the undercard is even announced. So either the claim was love talking louder than logic, or somebody in that household has never opened a seating chart in their life. And I am not even trying to be cruel when I say this. I am just reading the same screenshots everybody else is reading. Now here is the layer that makes this genuinely uncomfortable for her side, because the one thing Claressa Shields has consistently gotten angry about, visibly, audibly angry, in interview after interview, is the suggestion that her outside-the-ring life overshadows her boxing. There is a clip from this very press run where a host gently raised exactly that point, and you could watch her temperature rise in real time. The denial was instant. The pushback was sharp. And listen, I understand why that question stings. Nobody spends their entire life mastering a craft. 2 Olympic gold medals, undisputed in multiple divisions, a resume that is legitimately historic, and wants to hear that the public cares more about their love life than their left hook. That would hurt anybody. But there comes a point where the anger stops being a defense and starts being a confession, because if the drama were not carrying the weight, the interviews would not be built around it. The hosts are not booking Claressa Shields to break down film. They are booking Claressa Shields because they know she will eventually say something flammable about Remy Ma, about Papoose, about Alicia Baumgardner, about Layla Ali, and that the clip will feed their channel for a week. That is the transaction. And deep down, I believe she knows it is the transaction. Which brings us to the dynamic that this entire press run accidentally exposed. And it is the part almost nobody is saying plainly enough. Go back and watch the last several months of content from both sides of this feud. On one side, you have Remy Ma, who has done full, lengthy, headline-making interviews without once needing to say Claressa's name. Remy sat on major platforms and talked about her music, her film projects, her life, her plans. Whole conversations. No mention of the fight. No mention of the man they now share a headline over. No clips engineered off another woman's name. Remy Ma generates her own gravity. And then on the other side, you have a press run where, allegedly, every single viral moment orbits the same sun. The relationship, the feud, the drama, the response to the drama, the response to the response to the drama. One of these women needs the feud to stay famous, and one of them demonstrably does not. And the seeding chart is telling us which is which, because here is the brutal equation the internet landed on this week. If all of this visibility were real popularity, if the virality were admiration, it would convert. Views would become tickets. Clips would become sold rows. That is what genuine stardom does. It converts. But mockery does not convert. Spectacle does not convert. Being the main character of the joke does not sell a single seat, and the blue on that map is the receipt. And let me head off the counterargument before it even finishes loading, because I can already hear it. She is a woman in a man's sport. The system does not promote her. The deck is stacked. And there is real truth buried in that. Women's boxing has been underpromoted for decades, and that conversation deserves its own day in the sun. But here is the problem with leaning on it this week. Claressa Shields is not being compared to some fantasy. She is being compared to her own claims. Nobody outside her camp put her name next to Ali. Nobody outside her camp declared her the #1 draw in the sport. Those were her words, his words, their brand. When you set the bar at Michael Jordan, you do not get to grade yourself on the curve of underpromotion. Jordan's building was gone 5 days out. Tyson's building was gone 5 days out. That is the price of admission to the conversation she insists on being in. You do not get the mythology without the math. Now, for anyone thinking this is a one-off fluke, a slow market, a bad week, a ticketing glitch, I need to walk you back to the last time we watched this exact movie, because this is a sequel, not a premiere. In the lead-up to her previous fight, the same warning lights came on. Slow movement, sparse maps, bloggers and fans pointing at the availability and getting shouted down for it. And then, right at the end, a miraculous late surge. Suddenly the building was announced as packed, and the victory lap began almost before the ring walk music stopped. We heard the number. You remember the number, because she said it everywhere. 18,000. 18,000 strong, sold out, historic, another record for the GWOAT. Except the people who were actually in that building, and the people who studied the broadcast footage frame by frame, noticed something the commentary team never mentioned. The upper sections had entire empty rows, and the arena lighting on the broadcast was kept deliberately low around the bowl. Cameras tight on the ring, crowd shots cropped close, so that to the untrained eye at home, it looked like a wall-to-wall sellout. That is an old production trick. Darken the top, tighten the frame, let the noise do the talking. And I am not saying nobody showed up. Clearly a crowd was there. I am saying the crowd that was there and the crowd that was claimed were two different numbers, and the gap between them is the exact same gap we are staring at on this week's seating chart. So when people look at this 5-day window and ask how all of these blue seats are supposed to vanish by fight night, they are not being cynical. They are remembering. They watched the last act of this show, and they are waiting to see whether the ending involves genuine demand or just very generous lighting. But wait, because there is one more twist inside this ticket story that changes how you read every single sold seat on that map, and almost nobody covering this has clocked it. This is not a pure boxing card. The undercard and surrounding event, according to what has been publicly promoted, leans heavily into reality TV and internet personality territory. Names from the Baddies universe and the broader reality circuit are attached to this night. And before anybody twists that, there is nothing wrong with crossover promotion. It is smart business. It puts different audiences in the building. But it also means something that should make Claressa Shields and her camp deeply uncomfortable. A slice of the tickets that have sold, possibly a significant slice, were never hers to claim. Some of those buyers are coming for the reality personalities. Some are coming for the spectacle of the card as a whole. Some are coming because their favorite internet figure is walking out or sitting ringside or stirring something up on the broadcast. Which means the gray dots on that map, the seats that did sell, cannot even be fully credited to the main event. So the real question is not why the building is not sold out. The real question is how much of the building that is sold was ever coming to see Claressa Shields box in the first place. And once you ask that question out loud, you cannot unask it. And honestly, that question hangs over this entire era of her career because the architecture of her fame right now is not built the way she describes it. Listen to how she talks about her own popularity, and you will hear the word viral used like it is synonymous with beloved. But those are not the same thing, and the difference between them is the difference between a sellout and a giveaway. There is a version of fame where people show up because they admire you, and then there is a version where people watch because they cannot look away. The first kind fills arenas. The second kind fills comment sections. And the receipts of this press run say Claressa Shields is currently the champion of the second kind while insisting on the throne of the first. Think about what actually trends when she trends. It is not highlights of her combinations. It is not breakdowns of her ring IQ, which, and I will give her this forever, because it is true, is genuinely elite. What trends is the moment she catches herself mid-sentence about being prettier than somebody. What trends is the relationship soundbite. What trends is the blogs stitching her clips into comedy compilations. The criticism of her is what pops. The flame wars under her clips are what pop. The joke is popping. And there is an entire industry of creators, bloggers, and commentators who keep her name circulating in the algorithm every single day. And instead of recognizing that as the unpaid promotional army keeping her relevant between fights, she is famously at war with them. But here is the uncomfortable math. If every critical channel went silent tomorrow, if every blogger stopped covering her, if the only content about Claressa Shields was official boxing content, the blue on that map would be worse, not better. The very people she calls her enemies are the ones keeping the lights on in her algorithmic house. The promoters know it. The platforms know it. The only person who seems not to know it is sitting in the podcast chair getting angry about being overshadowed. Now, let me take a breath and be fair where fairness is earned, because this is not a hit piece, and I am not interested in pretending her resume is fake. The resume is real. Two-time Olympic gold medalist. Undisputed in multiple weight classes. She has genuinely done things no other American boxer, man or woman, has done. That is not nothing. That is historic, full stop. And in a sane sports economy, a resume like that would print money. But boxing has never been a sane economy. Boxing is a theater business wearing a sports clothes, and the theater half of that equation is about who the public wants to spend their Friday night with. And the tragedy, and I do mean tragedy, not insult, is that somewhere along the way, the strategy for selling Claressa Shields stopped being show them the greatness and became show them the chaos. And chaos has a ceiling. Chaos trends for 48 hours and then evaporates. Chaos does not renew season tickets. Chaos does not make a family of 4 in the Midwest drive 2 hours and pay lower bowl prices. The Ali she invokes was not beloved because he was chaotic. He was beloved because the chaos was welded to the craft, and when the bell rang, he backed up every syllable in front of the entire world. The Tyson she invokes sold tickets on fear and fury, yes, but underneath the theater was a wrecking ball people genuinely believed could end a man's night in 90 seconds. The persona was the rapping. The ring was the gift. And when the rapping becomes the product, when the interviews are the event and the fight is the afterthought, you get exactly what this week's map is showing. A whole lot of conversation and a whole lot of empty chairs. And here is where the story takes its sharpest turn. So stay with me, because this is the part that should genuinely worry her team. The drama economy she is currently riding has an expiration date, and everyone in this situation except her seems to see it. Feuds burn out. The public's appetite for any single storyline lasts months, not years. The relationship discourse will resolve itself one way or another. Relationships either settle into normalcy, which is boring, or explode into finality, which is also eventually boring. And on the day the drama well runs dry, what remains? Whatever the public associates with her name at that moment. If the association is boxing, she has a second act, a third act, a legacy tour, commentary, training, the whole post-career empire that actual draws get to enjoy. But if the association is the feud, if the name Claressa Shields is, in the public's mind, permanently filed under drama instead of dominance, then the moment the feud dies, the interviews dry up with it. Because as this entire press run just proved, the interviews were never really about boxing. They were about the circus. And circuses do not get encores. They get replaced. And since we are keeping every receipt on the table tonight, let us talk about the energy of the interviews themselves, because this is the detail the boxing world keeps circling without saying directly. When you watch a genuinely elite athlete do a press run, there is a posture to it, a discipline in the way they carry the conversation, a sense that the sport is the sun and everything else is a distant moon. Watch the great ones do media and you will notice they treat every question like a corner man treats a cut. Address it, close it, get back to the fight. But watch the clips from this run back to back, and the energy is something else entirely. It is reunion episode energy. It is season finale energy. It is the energy of someone who knows exactly which answers will be clipped by midnight, and gives them anyway. The blogs did not hijack this press run. The press run pulled up to the blogs, honked twice, and handed them the footage through the window. And that is the part that makes the anger about being overshadowed so hard to square. You cannot feed the machine premium fuel every single week and then stand in front of a blue seating chart, furious that the machine did not turn into a ticket office. The machine does what it is fed. And look at how the greats handled the same temptation. Because the comparison is not unfair, she invited it. Muhammad Ali talked more than any athlete in history, but every ounce of Ali's theater ended with a date, an opponent, and a building that sold out because people believed the fight would answer the talk. Mike Tyson barely had to talk at all. The fear did the marketing. Michael Jordan let the league and the highlight reel speak, and the mystique compounded like interest. Even inside her own sport right now, look at the fighters who move tickets. Their interviews are extension cords plugged straight into the ring. Every clip they produce lowers the distance between the viewer and the purchase button. Meanwhile, the clips from this run have done the opposite. They have turned a championship fight into background noise for a reality storyline, and the public has responded exactly the way the public always responds to background noise. They keep scrolling. They watch the clip, they laugh, they share it, and they close the app. Nobody screenshots a seating chart to buy a seat. They screenshot it to laugh at the blue. That distinction between audience and customer is the entire economics of this story, and allegedly it is the one calculation her camp refused to run before booking every couch on the internet. And one more thing about the Papoose factor, because it deserves its own paragraph. When your most passionate public defender goes on camera and argues that you outdraw Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford, he is not defending you. He is setting a trap for you. Because now every empty section is not just an empty section. It is evidence against a specific claim made by the person closest to you. Loyalty without data is not protection. It is exposure with a smile on it. And the cruel irony is that Papoose meant every word is love, but the internet is now quoting that interview under screenshots of Blue Rose, and the quote gets funnier to them with every unsold seat. That is how the machine works. It does not care what was meant. It only cares what can be clipped. And make no mistake, the opponent in the opposite corner deserves a paragraph in this conversation too, because she is the invisible casualty of this entire circus. She trained a full camp for the biggest stage of her life, and the week before the bell, the coverage of her own fight cannot go 10 seconds without a relationship soundbite. That is what the circus costs. It does not just eat the headliner's legacy. It eats the whole card's dignity, one viral clip at a time. Which is why the most telling moment of this entire saga might be one that has not happened yet. Here is the challenge floating around the boxing community right now, and it is devastating in its simplicity. Do one interview about boxing. Just one. Sit down on a major platform during fight week and talk exclusively about the craft, the game plan, the opponent's tendencies, the adjustments from the last camp, the technical reasons this fight matters historically. No relationship questions. No feud responses. No catching yourself mid-sentence about who is pretty. 90 minutes of pure boxing. And then measure it. Measure the clips, measure the views, measure the ticket movement in the 48 hours after it airs. If Claressa Shields is the draw she says she is, that interview should perform like a pay-per-view promo. But the reason that challenge stings, the reason nobody in her camp has answered it, is that everybody already suspects the result. The platforms would not book it, the clips would not travel, and the seats would stay blue. And a star who cannot sell the sport without the soap opera is not a star of the sport. That is not hate. That is the box office talking, and the box office does not care about feelings, narratives, or who caught themselves mid-sentence. Now, to be completely straight with y'all, there is still a world where this fight week ends in a save. Like I said, boxing has walk-up culture, the card has crossover pull, and her team is not stupid. If the building needs papering, the papering machine will run at full capacity, and the broadcast will be lit like a sold-out cathedral. She may well get her moment on fight night. And if she performs the way her resume says she can, the performance itself will be the best press release she has had in years. Because here is the twist nobody wants to say to her face. The path out of this mess is not another interview. It is the fight. A dominant, highlight reel, leave no doubt performance does more for her draw than 100 podcast chairs ever could. Knock the doors off, and the conversation changes. The clips that travel on Sunday morning could be uppercuts instead of sound bites. The choice, genuinely, for maybe the first time in this whole cycle, is still hers. But the window is 5 days wide, and it is closing. So now I want to hear from y'all, because the comments on this one are going to be a battlefield, and I already know it. First question, is this a demand problem or a marketing problem? Did the press run kill the ticket sales? Or were the ticket sales always going to expose that the draw was never what was advertised? Second, be honest. When you hear the name Claressa Shields, what is the very first thing that comes to your mind? The boxing or everything else? Do not lie in my comments, because we can all see each other. And third, the one her camp is definitely not going to like. If the Papoose claim was true, if she really is a top 3 draw in the entire sport of boxing, men or women, then what exactly are we looking at on that seating chart? Defend the claim. I will wait. And before you go anywhere, this is not the only blue map on the internet this week. There is another fighter whose ticket situation is even wilder, another camp telling the exact same story to the cameras while the numbers tell a completely different one, and what I found in those receipts makes this situation look almost gentle. That breakdown is next, and you are not going to believe whose name is on it. So do not touch that dial. Get in the comments, and I will see y'all at the next one.